Lisa and Michael have been together for 5 years. They lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, planned a future together, and often dreamed of moving to a larger house where there would be children, a dog, and a large garden. Their relationship seemed perfect, but sometimes routine and disagreements were hidden in the usual silence. One autumn morning, Lisa was driving from work. It was raining, the road was wet and slippery. Lisa was distracted for a second when she saw someone's figure on the side of the road, a tall man crossing the road, as if not noticing a car. A sharp blow, brakes, silence. Her heart pounded as she ran out of the car. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she shouted, leaning towards the young man. The guy raised his head. His eyes, dark brown and faintly surprised, met hers. He smiled faintly, although a bruise was visible on his forehead. "I think so," he whispered. She called an ambulance and went with him to the hospital. On the way, Lisa found out that his name was Alex. Doctors said he had no serious injuries, only bruises and a slight concussion. Lisa felt relieved, but also a strange restlessness. She was guilty in front of him. She is guilty of almost ruining his life. The next day, she couldn't stand it and returned to the hospital, holding a fruit basket in her hands. Alex was surprised, but accepted her care with a smile. "You don't have to do that," he said softly. "Don't consider yourself guilty anymore. It's not for redemption." "I just want to visit you," Lisa replied, barely blushing. From that day on, she came almost every day. She brought vegetables, books, sometimes cookies, which she baked herself. Alex talked a lot about himself, how he grew up in a large family, how he dreams of traveling the world, and so far he works as a simple mechanic. Lisa listened to him and noticed how something in her heart was changing. She didn't want to admit it, but there was a special connection between them. Every time Lisa returned home, Michael looked at her tenderly and did not suspect anything. He loved Lisa unconditionally, without asking unnecessary questions. "You look tired lately," he once said as she drank tea in the kitchen in silence. "Maybe we should take a day off? I can cook something for dinner." "No, everything is fine," she replied with a strange smile. "Just a lot of things to do." Lisa didn't dare to tell Michael about Alex. It seemed to her that this was a trifle that would disappear over time. But every time she saw Alex, her doubts grew. She was torn between ordinary life and this unexpected feeling that was like a mystery that no one should know. Alex was soon discharged from the hospital. To say goodbye, he handed her a small piece of paper. "Here is my phone number. If you suddenly want to talk or meet," he said, looking into her eyes. Lisa silently took the paper and drove home. She didn't know if she would call him, but now this choice was on her shoulders. She entered her house, where everything was as usual, the smell of fresh coffee, Michael's favorite music, and his warm gaze. "How was your day?" he asked. Lisa looked at him, trying to find the answer. She didn't know if she would ever be able to tell him the truth, but she understood one thing: sometimes love is not only a choice, but also a responsibility for someone you chose not to hurt. Days passed, and Lisa tried to return to her usual life with Michael. She did her best to drown out the voice of doubt in her head. But this piece of paper with Alex's number, a small piece of paper, seemed to burn her hand every time she accidentally touched it in her jacket pocket. One day, when Michael went to visit his friends for the weekend, Lisa was left home alone. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and stared at her phone. After a few minutes of hesitation, she took out a piece of paper and dialed the number. "Hello?" Alex's familiar voice was heard. Lisa was silent for a few seconds, trying to gather her thoughts. "It's me, Lisa," she finally replied. "I'm glad you called," Alex said, and his voice was relieved. "How are you?" "Everything is fine. I don't know why I got it. I just wanted to know how you are. You can come if you want. Nothing special, just talk." Lisa hesitated for a long time, but eventually agreed. She didn't know exactly what she was looking for in this meeting, but she was drawn to Alex like a magnet. She got into the car and drove to the address he sent. It was a small apartment in the old part of the city. Alex met her on the doorstep with the same warm smile that Lisa had already remembered. They sat on the couch, drank tea and talked about everything in the world, about childhood, about dreams, about what each of them is afraid of. Alex was simple, honest, and open, something that Lisa had long lacked in her relationship with Michael. She suddenly realized how long she and Michael didn't talk for real, just from the heart. "Are you happy, Lisa?" Alex suddenly asked, looking straight into her eyes. The question caught her by surprise. She couldn't answer right away. So she finally said, I have to be. Michael is good, we've been together for a long time. He loves me. But do you love him? Alex did not look away. Lisa lowered her eyes, unable to answer. She realized that she had lost that love somewhere, or maybe it just turned into a habit. Lisa, I'm not asking you to promise anything. I just wanted you to think about yourself. About what you really want. When she returned home, she felt guilty. She thought of Michael waiting for her at home, not suspecting that his Lisa was spending time with another man. She was afraid that she was ruining their lives with lies. But at the same time, she realized that she could no longer live as before. Lisa avoided Alex for several weeks. She tried to spend more time with Michael, talk to him, remember those moments when they were really happy. Michael noticed the changes in her. You've been sad lately for some reason, he said one evening. Do you want to tell me something? Lisa looked at him and felt something squeeze in his chest. She loved Michael, but as a brother, as a person with whom she lived for years. It wasn't the love that once burned between them. I'm confused, she replied honestly. I'm sorry, Michael. What do you mean? His voice shuddered. I can't live like this anymore. I'm not sure about my feelings. Michael looked at her with pain in his eyes. He was silent, but Lisa knew he understood everything. They talked for a long time that evening, and for the first time in many years they were frank with each other. Michael did not shout, did not reproach, only silently accepted Lisa's decision. The next day, Lisa dialed Alex's number. I made my choice, she said. I don't know what will happen next, but I don't want to lie to myself or him anymore. Alex listened to her in silence, and then replied, I'll always be there if you want to. And although Lisa didn't know how her life would develop further, she felt for the first time in a long time that she had taken the right move. It's been a month since I spoke with Michael. Lisa moved to a small rented apartment in the city center. At first she was lonely, silence oppressed, and memories of her past life with Michael were constantly returning. She didn't regret her decision, but she still felt pain after all. They went a long way together, and it was not easy to finish it. Alex didn't press. He appeared in her life cautiously, as if he was afraid to scare her. He rarely called, but his voice always sounded calm and supportive. One day he invited her for a walk. Lisa hesitated for a long time, but eventually agreed. They met in the park, where the leaves had already begun to change color to red and gold. Alex held 2 paper cups of coffee in his hands. I thought you liked cappuccino, he said, handing her one. How do you know? Lisa was surprised. You said several times in the hospital that you miss normal coffee. Lisa smiled. They walked slowly, talking about little things, about work, books, music. Alex was simple, genuine, and next to him, Lisa felt free. He didn't demand anything from her and didn't expect immediate answers. This lightness fascinated her. How are you? Alex suddenly asked. Have you found peace yet? Lisa sighed. I don't know. It's hard for me to put up with what I hurt Michael. He didn't deserve it. Sometimes we have to hurt someone to be honest with ourselves. It doesn't make you bad, Alex replied. The main thing is that you made a choice. Don't lie anymore is a lot. Lisa looked at him silently. His words were right. She couldn't go on living pretending that everything was fine, because it deceived not only Michael, but also herself. "And how are you? Did you find your peace?" she asked in response. "You know, I've thought about it a lot. That day when you knocked me down, I could get angry, I could hold my anger. But instead, I met you. So it must have been my happiness, so amazing, no matter how it sounds." Lisa smiled, and her heart felt warm for the first time in a long time. A few weeks later, Lisa and Alex began to see each other more often. She no longer hesitated, allowing herself to enjoy the moments next to him. They walked around the city, sat in coffee shops, and just talked. Alex revealed himself to her from new sides. It turned out that he is good at drawing and dreams of opening his own workshop. Lisa, in turn, for the first time in many years got old notes with poems, which she wrote at university. "You have to show them to people," Alex said when he found her notebook. "You have talent." "It's just a hobby," Lisa waved it off. "No, it's a part of you," he insisted. "You have to believe in yourself." Alex's words touched her deeply. He was able to see in her what Lisa herself did not notice. Next to him, she once again became herself, Lisa she once lost in everyday routine and compromises. One day, Lisa received a surprise call from Michael. He asked to meet. "I'd like to talk," he said quietly. They met in a coffee shop where they once liked to spend evenings. Michael looked tired, but his eyes were still kind. "How are you?" Lisa asked. "I'm learning to live," he replied. "It was very painful at first. I didn't understand why this happened. But then I realized that I was guilty. We both lost our feelings, but we were afraid to admit it." Lisa looked down. "I'm sorry, Michael. You don't have to ask for forgiveness. You did what you thought was right. And I'm grateful for your honesty, even if it came so late." He smiled, and Lisa felt her feel better. "I hope you're happy," Michael added goodbye. "I'm trying," she replied. That evening, Lisa was sitting on the balcony of her apartment and looking at the city, which was glowing with thousands of lights. Alex came over and sat down next to him. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes. I'm just thinking about how much has changed." Alex took her hand and squeezed it into his. "Sometimes life has to change for us to find ourselves," he said softly. Lisa looked at him and smiled. She didn't know what awaited them next, but for the first time in many years she felt she was on the right track. Winter has come. The city was drowning in snow, and the streets, covered with white blankets, seemed different, quieter, calmer. Lisa and Alex often walked together in parks, enjoying the winter air, which seemed to clear thoughts. Their relationship developed slowly, without haste, but became stronger every day. Alex was patient. He didn't demand big promises from Lisa and was just around, letting her be herself. One day, when they were returning from a walk, Alex stopped in front of a bookstore that was cozy and warm. "Shall we go in?" he asked. "Remember, you said that you once dreamed of having your own book?" Lisa smiled and lowered her eyes. "It was so long ago." "So what?" "Dreams don't grow old," Alex replied, opening the door for her. The bookstore smelled of coffee and printed paper. Lisa ran her hand over the covers of the books and suddenly felt something in her wake up, something long forgotten, but native. Alex watched her carefully. "Are you still writing?" he asked. "A little. But it's not serious," she replied. "Lisa," Alex took her hand. "If something makes you happy, it's serious. You have to believe in your dreams, even if they seem small." Those words touched her. That same evening, Lisa took out her old notebook and started writing again. Poems, short reflections, memories, everything that has accumulated over the years. Alex was the first to whom she dared to show her work. "It's unbelievable," he said, reading page after page. Your words are real, they are clingy. Lisa felt embarrassed but happy. She began to believe that her voice, her thoughts really mattered. Once, during the winter holidays, Alex invited Lisa to his family. It was a large, noisy house, full of laughter and the smell of homemade food. His sisters and brothers received Lisa with warmth, as if they had known her all their lives. "Alex has talked so much about you," said one of his sisters. "We're so glad he's finally happy." Lisa looked at Alex talking to his nephew and felt her heart fill with warmth. Here, among these people, she felt part of something real and important. That evening, Alex led Lisa to the window where snow was falling. "I know it's not easy for you," he said. "You're still hesitating whether you did it right. But I want you to know, I'm there, and I'll be there for as long as you need." Lisa looked at him and for the first time in a long time felt her doubts dissolving. She knew that there were still many steps ahead, a lot of work on herself and her life. But next to Alex, she was no longer afraid of this path. "Thank you," she whispered. "For your patience. For believing in me." Alex smiled and gently hugged her. From that evening, Lisa felt that her life was finally beginning to form a single picture. She didn't know what was waiting for them in the future, but she was no longer afraid to move forward. Alex taught her the main thing, to believe in herself and not to be afraid of change. And that was the beginning of her new, true story. The next few months were a period of transformation for Lisa. She plunged headlong into her work. She began to write every day, organize her old poems, and even sent several of them to a literary competition. Alex was there, supported and inspired her, but at the same time gave the space that Lisa needed so much to find herself. One spring morning, Lisa received a letter from the editorial office, where she sent her work. Her heart beat faster as she tore the envelope. There was a letter written officially, but with warm words. "Your works impressed our editorial staff with their sincerity and strength. We will be happy to print your collection of poems in the nearest issue. Congratulations, and we look forward to further work." Lisa sat on the chair, clutching the sheet in her hands. Her first victory is small, but so significant. Her words will finally be heard by others. It was like the confirmation that she was moving in the right direction. "What happened?" asked Alex, who came into the apartment. Lisa looked up at him and smiled, showing the letter. "My collection will be printed. I can't believe it." Alex hugged her, picked her up in the turns, and laughed with sincere happiness. "I told you, you have talent," he exclaimed. "This is just the beginning, Lisa." That evening they celebrated in a small coffee shop, where they always liked to sit in silence with a cup of tea. Lisa felt incredible joy, but at the same time a slight fear, before the new, unknown, before her further path would develop. "Did you ever think you'd dare to do that?" Alex asked, looking into her eyes. "No. I was once afraid that I couldn't do anything." "That it's worth nothing," Lisa replied. "Now you can see that it's not so?" He squeezed her hand lightly. "I see. But you know, I would never have dared without you. You appeared in my life so unexpectedly, and changed it. It was you who changed everything, Lisa." "I was just around," Alex replied. Spring flashed quickly. Lisa worked on the collection, preparing for its publication. Her life gained meaning and harmony, but sometimes she still remembered Michael. She knew that part of her story remained in the past with him, and this is normal, after all. People who were once close always leave a mark in the heart. One day, returning home, Lisa unexpectedly met Michael on one of the streets of the city. He looked good, but a little different, more confident and calmer. "Lisa," he said in surprise. "Hi, Michael," she replied, feeling her heart tighten with excitement. They stopped and remained silent for a few minutes, looking at each other. "How are you?" Lisa finally asked. "I'm fine," Michael replied with a smile. "I've changed my life a little. I even took a cooking course that I had long dreamed of." "Is it true?" That's great. I'm happy for you. And you? He looked at her carefully. You seem to have changed. Your eyes are glowing. Yes. I found something I had lost a long time ago. Myself. Michael nodded, and there was no resentment or anger in his gaze, only understanding. I'm happy for you, Lisa. You deserve happiness. They said goodbye, and Lisa looked after him for a long time, realizing that this episode of their lives was finally closed. She no longer felt guilty, only gratitude for the experiences and memories that made her stronger. When her first collection of poems came out, Lisa was sitting in a coffee shop, flipping through her copy. Alex sat down next to her, looking at her with pride. Well, he said. Officially. You are a writer. Lisa smiled and looked up at him. This is just the beginning. Now I know it. She was no longer afraid of change, she was not afraid of the unknown. Next to Alex, and most importantly, thanks to herself, she found a new life, a life in which she could be herself, right, and truly love. And that was the most important thing. Several years have passed. Lisa stood by the large window of her new studio, which overlooked a small park. The room smelled of fresh coffee and paper, and in the corner stood a bookcase filled with her favorite books and her own collections of poems. Her life was calm, but full of meaning. Creativity, which she was so afraid to show the world, has now become her calling. Alex entered the studio with 2 cups of coffee. Tired? He asked, putting one cup on the table next to her notes. A little bit, Lisa replied, smiling. Today is not written. You need a rest, Alex said, sitting down next to the sofa. You know, even the best poets sometimes need a break. He always found the right words. Alex remained the same, calm and patient, a man who loved her unconditionally. Lisa often thought that if it weren't for him, she would have stayed to live in her fears and compromises. Do you know what I saw in the city today? Alex continued. What? Your new collection greeted everyone from the showcase of the bookstore. Bestseller of the week, he said, smiling proudly. Lisa laughed, shaking her head. It's all so strange. I couldn't have imagined that people would read my poems. You just stopped doubting yourself, Alex replied. This was the key. Lisa looked at him and felt the same gratitude again as many years ago, when he first supported her decision to write. That same evening, the two of them were walking in the park, holding hands. The air was cool, and Lisa wrapped herself in her favorite scarf. You know, sometimes it seems to me that fate was too generous to me, she said suddenly. You appeared so unexpectedly and changed everything. Sometimes people meet at the best moment, even if he seems to be the worst, Alex replied. I could call the day you knocked me down the most unsuccessful in my life. But now I know it was my best day. Lisa stopped and looked at him. Her eyes were filled with tears, not from sadness, but from happiness. Alex gently touched her face. You are my most important thing by chance, Lisa, he whispered. Lisa smiled and hugged him tightly. She knew that this man was her destiny, even if the road to him was long and not easy. A year later, Lisa published her 3rd collection of poems, and together with Alex, they fulfilled their long-standing dream of opening a small coffee shop bookshop. It was cozy, there were books on the shelves, and the aroma of coffee and vanilla was in the air. In the center of the coffee shop there was always a small table, on which lay new works of young poets, which Lisa helped to publish. Do you think people are interested in this? She once asked Alex, looking at a group of young boys and girls reading books over coffee. Sure, Alex replied. You used to be in their place. And you only needed a little faith in yourself and someone who believed in you more than you. Then let always be that someone for others? Lisa said softly, smiling. Always, Alex nodded. And the two of them continued to build their lives calm, but filled with meaning, love and warmth. Lisa was no longer afraid of either change or the future. After all, she knew, next to Alex and in her work, she would always remain herself. And that was the most important thing. A few more years have passed. The coffee shop bookstore opened by Lisa and Alex became a special place in the city. It was always full of people, some came for a book, others just enjoyed coffee and the atmosphere of peace and inspiration. On the shelves there were both world-famous masterpieces and works by young authors, whom Lisa helped to take their first steps in creativity. One spring morning, Lisa stood behind the counter and discussed another new book with a regular visitor. The woman held her last compilation and smiled. "Your words are always on time," she said. "I sometimes think you're writing about my life." Lisa only smiled modestly, but the warmth poured in her heart. She has long understood that her creativity is a bridge to other people, a way to share emotions and help someone find answers to important questions. "I'm sorry, I'll leave you," Lisa said, seeing Alex waving to her from the other end of the hall. "What happened?" she asked, approaching him. Alex held a letter sent from a well-known publishing house. His eyes lit up with joy. "Lisa, they're offering you a big contract for a new book. They want to send your works in Europe and the USA," he said, almost without hiding his admiration. Lisa opened her eyes wide, not believing what she heard. It was a chance she never dreamed of. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "Yes, absolutely," Alex confirmed. "You deserve it, Lisa. Your work inspires people." She hugged him and felt tears rolling from her eyes. They were tears of joy and gratitude for the life she was able to build, and for the fact that there was a man who believed in her more than anyone else. The next few months were intense, trips to the publishing house, meetings, new texts. Lisa worked until night, but Alex was always there. He brought her tea, reminded her about the rest and just listened when she tiredly talked about her doubts. "I'm afraid it's too much for me," she said one day as they sat on the balcony of their house, looking at the stars. "Lisa, that's not too much," Alex replied, taking her hand in his. "This is your way. You deserve every moment of this success. What if I disappoint people?" "You will never disappoint anyone if you are honest with yourself," he said. "People read your words because they are real. Don't be afraid to be yourself and they will follow you." Lisa looked at him and smiled. Alex always spoke as if he saw her soul better than herself. After the publication of her book abroad, Lisa was invited to a literary evening in Paris. Alex went with her, supporting her every step of the way. When she went on stage and saw people who came to listen to her words, Lisa felt that she was no longer afraid. All those years of doubt, pain and loss brought her here. "Thank you for being here," she began her speech. "I once didn't believe that my words could hurt anyone. I thought my dreams were nothing but vanity. But I realized one thing: each of us has a voice, and that voice has power. You just have to use it." There was a warm applause in the hall. Alex looked at her from the front row, and there was so much love and pride in his eyes that Lisa forgot about everything in the world for a moment. After returning home, Lisa stood by the window of her studio with a cup of tea, looking at the park. Alex walked into the room and hugged her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "About how my life has changed," she replied. "If someone had told me then that everything would be like this, I would not have believed it." "Sometimes the best comes unexpectedly," Alex replied. Lisa turned around and looked into his eyes. "You know, I used to consider the day of our meeting my worst. But now I understand that it was the most important day of my life." "I think so too," Alex smiled. They hugged, and Lisa felt calm. She no longer looked for answers, did not doubt herself and was not afraid of the future. Her life was her own, and the love she found with Alex became the solid foundation on which everything else was built. Now she knew, every encounter, every mistake and every step was important. Because it was they who led her to this moment, the moment of true happiness. Several years have passed. Lisa and Alex continued to live their measured but rich lives. Their coffee shop bookstore flourished and turned into a place where not only book lovers, but also creative people who found inspiration and support here met. Lisa has already published several successful collections, and her books had begun to be translated into different languages. Her name became famous in the world of literature, but it has not changed. Lisa was still the same humble woman who valued simple things, the silence of the morning, the beautiful book, and the love of the man who became her support. One warm summer day, Alex suggested that Lisa go out of town for the weekend. "You work too hard," he said, packing a blanket and a thermos with tea. "You need a rest." "Okay, good," Lisa laughed. "Just don't forget to grab the fruit. I know how you like to eat in nature." They went by car to a small house in the forest, which they rented for 2 days. The road was calm, and Lisa looked out the window, enjoying the views. Alex occasionally joked, telling her stories that made her laugh. Next to him, life was easy and simple. The house stood on the edge of the forest, and a small lake sparkled nearby. Lisa immediately felt the tension dropped from her, which she didn't even notice at work. "I'll leave you here for a few hours," Alex said as they put things out. "I'll go fishing, and you can read, write, or just relax. And no talk about work." "You're strict," Lisa smiled, sitting down in a wicker chair with a book. She watched Alex disappear behind the trees and thought about how much her life had changed because of this chance encounter. She was once afraid of losing stability, but now she knew that change was the best thing that could happen to her. Without them, she would never have known what true love and true freedom are. After lunch, Alex returned with a few fish and a satisfied look. "Here," he said proudly. "Now we will have dinner." "You still surprise me," Lisa laughed as he helped him clean the fish. "Who would have thought you were such a skilled fisherman?" "You still don't know much about me," Alex winked. They cooked dinner together, and Lisa felt how happy this simple moment became. They are together, in the middle of nature, without haste and without unnecessary words. After dinner, they sat on the shore of the lake, wrapped in a blanket, and watched the sun hide behind the horizon. "Lisa," Alex suddenly said softly. "Yes." She turned to him. "Do you remember the day we first met?" "How can I forget him?" "I almost hit you with a car," she replied, smiling. "I thought it was an accident. But now I understand that it was fate. There is meaning in every step we take, even if we don't see it right away." Lisa looked at him carefully, her heart tightened with tenderness. "I think so too," she replied. Alex took a small velvet box out of his pocket and opened it. A graceful silver ring shone inside. "Lisa, I want to spend every day with you. You are my inspiration, my peace, and my meaning. Will you marry me?" Lisa froze, and then a sincere smile appeared on her face. Her eyes were filled with tears of joy. "Yes, Alex. Yes," she replied, hugging him. The wedding was modest and cozy, exactly what Lisa and Alex wanted. It took place in their coffee shop bookstore, among books, aromas of coffee and close people. Lisa was happy to see familiar faces, her friends, Alex's family, and even Michael, who came to congratulate her on a new life. "You look incredible," Michael said when they were alone for a few minutes. "I'm happy for you, Lisa. You deserve this happiness." "Thank you, Michael," she replied. "I will always be grateful to you for everything." Michael smiled and nodded, and then went to the guests, leaving Lisa alone. Alex walked up to her and reached out. "Are you happy?" he asked. "The happiest," Lisa replied, looking into his eyes. "Many years have passed." Lisa sat in the same chair in her studio, looking at the evening sun slowly hiding behind the horizon. Her hands held an old notebook filled with poems, thoughts, and memories. It was the same notebook that she was afraid to show anyone many years ago. Now his pages were cheese-lead, slightly rubbed, but they preserved the entire history of her life, from doubts and pain to peace and happiness. "Grandma, are you writing poetry again?" asked a child's voice. Lisa raised her eyes and saw a little boy with brown hair and brown eyes that were so reminiscent of Alex. "No, my dear, today I'm just remembering," she replied with a smile. The boy sat down next to him and looked at the old notebook. "What is this about?" "About you?" "Yes, this is a story that I once wrote myself, but that others helped me find." Lisa looked at him and added, "Someday you will understand that life writes our best stories. The main thing is not to be afraid of change." "Did Grandpa also help you?" the boy asked, looking at Alex's photo on the table. Lisa nodded and gently stroked the picture with her hand. In the photo, the two of them smiled against the background of their first coffee shop bookshop, young, happy, and full of dreams. "Your grandfather was my support, my friend, and the greatest gift of fate. He always believed in me more than I did," Lisa replied. The boy nodded, as if trying to understand all those adult words. Then he got up and ran to the window. "Let's go outside, Grandma. You said that spring is the best time to dream." Lisa smiled and slowly got up from the chair. She glanced one last at her old notebook and closed it, as if completing an entire chapter of her life. Each page was proof that she lived for real, without fear of being herself and loving. "All right, honey, let's go," she said, taking the boy by the hand. "Tell me what you're dreaming about." They went out to the porch of the house, and Lisa breathed in the fresh spring air. The sun was hiding behind the horizon, but there was a new day ahead, new stories, new dreams, and new changes. Lisa knew one thing: life was always full of surprises, but that was his true beauty. She went her way, found love, freedom, and faith in herself. And now she could pass on that wisdom. Because the main thing in life is to move forward, not to be afraid of the new, and to remember that even the smallest steps can lead to great happiness. This is how its story ended, but others began.